We're going to gaze into the future. So this is we're going to take a trip to the year 2020 and kind of get a picture of what that looks like. So I want to have the participants of this drive, and you're going to be in the back of the wherever we're going here. Every vehicle gets us there. So Jennifer, I can say you just say hi. So I think people will kind of recognize your voice anyway. But just give us a quick 10-second introduction of who you are, so they recognize your voice.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for being here. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm the only girl, so that makes it very easy. 2 seconds, been with CareerBuilder for 7 years, been in the HES industry for 13, and I'm excited to see what the future holds.
All right. Brendan, quickie?
Sure. I'm Brendan. I've been at LinkedIn for about a year and spent a bunch of time at Microsoft in a company called Sapient during the .com boom, and looking forward to talking about the future.
Just so you know, Brendan, you're cutting out a little bit. I heard like the fourth word cut out, so just so you'll be aware of that. Doug Berg? Can't hear you, Doug. You must be on mute.
I just came off. This is Doug Berg with Jobs to Web. Excited to be here today. Lou, like Lou, I've been in the recruiting business a long time, only half as long as Lou, which is still a long time. But 20 years on my side. And
okay, so I could add Brendan's years in recruiting, Jennifer's years in recruiting, and Doug's years in recruiting. That's how long I've been in recruiting.
That's right.
And I guess let me make the statement here, is I've been here so long that I'm hoping I'm going to use it as my last blast here before I go on to my next career, is trying to really put a vision together what the future might look like. So I want to kind of start by saying, here's a diagram of what I perceive to be the state of recruiting. Now, let me just define the diagram, and then I want to ask you guys, if it's first, I'm going to ask you questions. So you can kind of put in the chat area, yeah, it's reasonable or not reasonable. That was a description I gave. Hey, you got a bunch of candidates coming into your sourcing pool. You lose a bunch of them because of website, managers don't interview, recruiters don't interview, they don't know how to close the deal, you got ads that are boring, you got this application process that makes no sense, you got systems that squirrel you up that make it difficult for a good candidate to get in the game. First question is that reasonably relevant, just from people's mind? I want to see what you guys say in the question mark. Then I'll kind of go around the pool. I want to hear from the audience. Relevant or not relevant? Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, now the real hard question, when do you think I had this drawn? That I actually went to a cartoonist and said, hey, I got this vision of what the world is like in recruiting, draw it. When do you think that happened? So just put a year in there. Well, not 1980. You didn't have a... Well, certainly 1947. Give me a break. I wasn't even born then. Well, actually, I was born then, so neither here nor there. Yeah, I had it done in 1999. It was actually, maybe in 98, it was Fortune cover story said, with the emergence of the job boards, the war for talent would be won. Any of our panelists want to comment? I'll just kind of scramble, and then whoever talks first, you got the mic. And what do you guys take on this whole thing? Because I think the point I'm making is, much hasn't changed. A lot has changed, but a lot hasn't changed. At the macro level, we're still pretty squirrely. At the micro level, doing stuff, we're doing a lot different. Anybody want to kind of comment on just the state of affairs? Don't feel obligated.
This is Brendan. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, friend.
Okay. I guess I would say, yeah, I think a lot of the truths hold. I actually think all these things they're simple intellectually, but they're hard to execute on and operate on with recurring rigor. And I actually think the degree of difficulty has gone up just because of the amount of data around candidates that now is available everywhere. So you've got these these 6 things that you've got on your cartoon here, and I'd say the game has been stepped up now that, oh, by the way, there's candidate information all over the place.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Even more pressure on the system.
Doug or Jennifer, any quick comments, just your thoughts as we set the stage? Because my goal is to try to plug those leaks here, guys. That's why I say, okay, if I'm going to do something here and being in this industry so long, trying to fix it, I'm not going to get there, but so I'm a bit cynical, but I still like to give it a shot. Doug, Jennifer, any thoughts on that?
I agree. Sorry.
Go ahead. I mean, I've seen companies, have really complex systems, and a lot of your stuff here, Lou, is around systems on the back end, right? And now I'm seeing a tremendous amount of fragmentation out on the supply side of where talent is, too. So people don't just live, in the job boards anymore. Now they're in the social networks. They're, on Twitter. They're mobilely running around. And so there's enough complexity to try to solve for on the back-end system of when somebody applies for a job. How do you streamline that process and make it as frictionless as possible? But then identification of talent, both inside the company and outside of the company, is getting much more complicated as well. So the need for companies to streamline this, get it integrated, try to make it as flat as possible is going to be a real challenge. It's possible because technology is making so many things possible, but man, companies that get this stuff figured out are going to have a huge advantage in terms of growth and dealing with up and down cycles in the economy.
Good, cool. Jennifer, comment?
No, I agree with both what Brendan and Doug said. I think just to add to it, I think it all goes back to the basic underlying sort of principle of what's driving the talent strategy. And no matter what technology you're using, the more layers that you add on top of the piece of the technologies, if you don't have the underlying factor of what your needs are, what your goals are, all the rest of it, you're not going to know how to source. You're not going to know how to write great ads. You're not going to have strong recruiters. So going back to the basics and reconsidering, especially nowadays that candidates have so much more information about them and there are so many different types of technology, you've got to have the basics figured out.
All right, good. Okay, so here's what I'm going to say to trends. How would we solve this problem? So let's just let that be the objective at a pretty high level. Okay, we're going to try to solve that problem in the next 90 minutes. So number one, I'm going to say big trend I kind of want to, in my mind, I think is important. Let me kind of get back to just, I don't know if I want that or not. I guess this is what I want. First off, I'm going to contend you got to get your talent and strategy aligned. And I'm going to contend right now our processes are not designed and aligned with strategy. So I'm just going to make that statement. We're going to discuss it. There's obviously a clear, massive shift to passive candidates. Especially when 82% of the market is passive and only 18% are active, you got to shift to passive, and a lot of stuff is going on. That certainly changes the whole dynamics of the game. Another big trend is this idea of auto matching. Hey, you got a job, and all of a sudden, within moments, everybody in your network knows about the job, and it automatically matches. And I'm going to contend that's going to get more intelligent as time goes forward. The idea of multi-level networking, not just first degree, but second degree, third degree, interconnected. And I'll also make the statement that the idea of a talent network is going to replace the idea of a talent community. Talent network is, hey, I got a bunch of people that are already connected. As long as my connections are strong and I got some good nodes in there, I can mix and match everything real time. So I don't have to have what would be considered a proprietary talent pool, because once everybody's got information, everybody's got the same talent pool. So that's going to shift a bit. The idea of, I'll call it the advanced hub and spoke, but we'll kind of get into that, which is the idea of pushing people into a pool and then pushing back out to a requisite job. The idea of going reckless, meaning let's create the rec after you've hired or after you've found and selected the candidate. So that's just a topic we need to discuss. The demise of what I'll call the full-time equivalent. Right now, we're forced to say, oh, we got to have a full-time equivalent. But when you start thinking about contingent workers, project workers, young people want to work projects, old people aren't going to be able to, are only going to work projects. You have this dynamic, changing workforce, and part of it is we're still thinking about full-time equivalents, and that's not really the game anymore. It's going to be a mix of full-time equivalents and different kinds of layers of people at different categories in the job. And finally, I'm going to contend is the hiring manager self-serve. If all of this is interconnected and everything's visible, why can't the hiring manager do it him or herself? And that changes the role of the recruiters. That's where we're going here to discuss all of those concepts. Let me kind of get into what 100% visibility of jobs and people. Let me get into the history, and then I'm going to have let me give this overview of the history of how I see the history from my perspective, and let our panelists kind of describe it. So you see where we're going, but I want to kind of now go to the past and establish the framework for the future. So I'm going to say for those of you who have not been pre-1990, we posted jobs in newspapers, or magazines. That's where it got. It was very, and maybe not every job was posted because number one, it was inconvenient. And they used a lot of recruiters those days. So, but 10% of the jobs were posted. 90% was a hidden job market. Interesting, candidates were also pretty hidden. You couldn't get to candidates unless you had your own little Rolodex, and that's really what it was. It wasn't very efficient. So really the variable there was time. If I'm looking for a job at the moment that job came up in the local newspaper, I could mix and match. If that day didn't happen or that week didn't happen, it was history. So if some great company was looking for a job last week and I'm looking this week, never happened. So I would say timing was critical. It was almost random luck if you were looking for a job at the time the company was looking for a person. Pretty inefficient, but that's the way it was. That was pre-90. Then the internet came along, and the underlying architecture was very rec-driven. But what was interesting is the recs were there for a month or 2 months, so timing wasn't as critical. You could be looking within that window of time, and if you were a candidate looking, you actually had a chance to get that job, at least find it. But it was obviously geared to active candidates who were looking for your job. We still had the hidden candidate market, so in the early 90s, I'll say before recruiters started saying, hey, we'll bring in corporate recruiters, candidates were pretty largely hidden. You still had to work hard to get your candidates. And then we came to 2005. And Doug, and I think Doug, I would say, at Jobs to Web was the leader in pulling this off. The hub and spoke. Hey, we'll create this search engine optimized hub for all engineers, all salespeople, and build talent communities. And then we'll nurture those talent communities with some kind of CRM system. Then we'll add analytics to it to find out what's the best source of candidates. We'll start adding some matching capability. Maybe it was somewhat intelligent matching at the title level, maybe normalized title, and then start looking at some big things within the job. But still rec-driven. You still push people to the rec. But you started picking up people who were semi-active, who were active at one point in time and joined your talent community. So you broaden the pool of candidates. Now we're here today, 2011. LinkedIn is probably the biggest driver. Facebook is trying to get into the game, but certainly build giant networks and interconnect that. So now you could say we're pretty close to 100% visibility to all candidates. Certainly on LinkedIn, they got 100 million people in the U.S., say 80 million or 90 million in the U.S. By 1 degree of separation, you got the whole country. So if you're a pretty good networker, you're pretty well, and take Facebook, you got the whole country. So everybody is visible. Jobs are 100% visible. Things are starting to change at the network level, and they're starting to automatic, and LinkedIn's coming out with this automatic connect system. JobBite's got this automatic connect system. Indeed's got in the door automatic connecting your jobs with people you know in companies. So now it's almost walking away from, it's not recruiters finding candidates. Candidates are now urged to find an employee they know in the company, and that employee gets them into the organization. So you can start seeing these trends starting to go on. Let me kind of just stop there, get some insight from our panelists as to, now this is my vision of what I've seen it. I've looked at it, obviously narrowed it down to make some points here, but what's everyone else take? Let me just kind of go around the horn. Jennifer, you want to have first shot at it, and then I'll go to Brendan and then Doug?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm sorry, I can't comment on pre-1990.
Thanks a lot.
Sorry, just easy. But from 1990 on, I mean, I agree with you that this is exactly how things worked. I mean, from my background, I throw in the advent, if you will, of the applicant tracking systems and the beast of technologies. And when you start getting into that into 1990, obviously rec-driven becomes the most important thing you can do. And then the technology really, from my opinion, hasn't changed that much as far as the ATSs and the ERPs and all the rest of it. So it's sort of unfortunate.
I'll bring the chart back.
Yeah, I'm like, you lost me. It's sort of unfortunate. I think that, when you look at what Jobs to Web has done, with the advent of the talent communities and what LinkedIn has done, it's impressive because the whole world has sort of shifted to be candidate-centric versus company-centric, if you will. So
that's an interesting point. Yeah. So I'm going to me that's a company-centric to candidate-centric, and I think that starts setting up the alignment with strategy. Brendan, any thoughts on this or your point?
Yeah, I mean, you made some good points, and Jennifer completely agree with you. I think one thing that is going to happen or is starting to happen, my contention is no organization has, people are understanding that the world has now changed to this candidate-driven sort of data-transparent world. And for me, it begs the question of how do you set up your organization? What type of people do you hire? Given that there's data all over the place, I think it's akin in some level to financial markets and optimizing huge amounts of data to find out really where the best value, most valuable people are. And to do that takes tools we've never seen before. But also just begs the question of what type of skills do we need? And just one quick thought is you know, 10 years ago, you might pay some guy you don't even know who he is to give you the company directory from Anderson Consulting, and there's a gold mine for you.
Yeah, I had that one.
Yeah, exactly. You took weeks or months to go through it and cull it and understand it. I mean, that's all done in a matter of minutes now. So it puts, there's a different set of skills that are now needed in my mind to both mine the data, and I think it also puts a lot of pressure back on who really has incredibly influential recruiting chops, because now you can find people pretty easily, and I think it brings it back to, you know, you still got to have some of those core tenets of being a very influential, persuasive recruiter at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Good point. So your case, I think you're right. The skills to be a good recruiter in this market changes. Doug, what's your take?
Sorry, I came off mute. You know, I think the big thing, Lou, is from 90 to 2011, the big change I've seen is that you went from a static resume, right, that maybe was on paper or on the job boards, to a dynamic resume, one that's changing. It's multidimensional, and you know, there's a lot of incompatibilities between an applicant's tracking system that takes a Kodak moment of someone at the point of apply, or even when you're doing a resume search on someone that's on a job board that registered a year ago versus, you know, who they are now, what they're working on now. And so that's big. And I think that we're probably also looking at, you know, this move from a static resume to a dynamic one is happening on the rec side as well. You know, recs are traditionally, hey, this is what we need, and it's very static, and it's the wish list of the manager. But when you look at who actually got hired against the requisition, so much of the talent that came in against it on the applicant side will influence and change what the rec actually was based on who the best candidate was, or the dynamics or the attributes that came in against it. And this kind of ties to your rec last kind of theme, Lou, is that we're seeing that there's a big negotiation that happens from the wish list perfect definition of who the manager wants versus who actually gets hired. And I think the frustration the candidates feel in the market is that they never get to be a part of that negotiation or a part of the communication process that happens in terms of how that selection process went down.
That's a cool point. Yeah, it's interesting.
And so I think those are going to be things that you're going to see really start to change in the next wave or era of recruiting here. So those are my thoughts.
Good. No, good. So I think we got some at the technology level, how recs are written, some at the skill level of the recruiter, and some even company versus candidate centric. And I actually think, if I talk about this next piece, I actually think this is pretty true. I, as a recruiter, and Brendan is a recruiter, Doug manages recruiting technology, and Jennifer's at Career Builder, so we all bring different perspectives. But if I look at it at the systems level, so I just want to kind of lay the landscape very quickly here, and here's a comment that I wrote the comment and I wrote an article about it. You can't hire passive candidates who aren't looking, so this is a strategy kind of discussion, using the same processes for hiring active candidates who are looking. So we have this massive shift to going after passive candidates. And we did a big survey with LinkedIn. I'm not going to go through. We did about 10 webcasts on the last year, which basically said 8% were very active of the fully employed market, 10% were somewhat active, another 16% were only tiptoeing through employee referral programs, 44% would take a call from a recruiter, and 22% would talk to a recruiter but wouldn't ever listen unless you paid them the sun and the moon. Regardless, though, it was a huge, huge grump of people who were passive or needed something other than, they wouldn't apply, they want to talk to a manager, they had a totally different need set, totally different customer. It is a different customer. And then we're still using, hey, they're going to apply to the ATS, our applicant tracking system, we're going to post an ad. So we have this inconsistency between hiring great people. We all want to hire great people. We want to shift to passive, but we still use the old tools to do it. So here's what I'm going to do very quickly, then I'll open it up to the panel. Every company wants to hire great people. But when you look at what they do, they write boring jobs that don't appeal to great people. The messages are inconsistent. Managers want great people, but they put a boring rec down. They define lateral transfers in their job description. We make everybody go through this formal process where good candidates don't want to go through that. There's this interim step where they got to learn about the job, the company, the career, and all this kind of stuff. And we force them to this process that's only really appropriate for when you have excess supply of candidates. So to me, if I had to make a general statement, without this alignment of talent, how do you want to hire people, and how you do it, if you don't align those processes, you'll never get there. And I'm going to contend that first picture I drew, the cause of that was because of the lack of alignment here. So I'm going to make the statement is the lack of alignment causes all the problems we have with hiring, and unless we make that alignment, we'll never get to a solution, no matter what Doug develops. Doug is probably the most brilliant technology guy in recruiting in the world, but if you don't align your strategy with your tactics, all of Doug's great work will never get there. So you got to blow them up. And to me, it's a process overhaul. So that's what I'm going to make the contention. So let me just open it up to the panel. I mean, this is a pretty high-level contention, but I believe this is the root cause of the problem. Let me start with Doug and go backwards. Doug, Brendan, and Jennifer, and we'll kind of see how that works out. So, and don't necessarily agree with me or not. I'm just putting out there how I believe.
I think definitely having your process aligned to your strategy is huge, Lou. And as you and I have talked about in the past, if companies don't have this, the ramifications of it are not only frustrated hiring managers. I can't tell you how many hiring managers have so much criticism of their recruiting department, and it's primarily because of the systems. It's not that they can't figure out who I want to hire. It's the getting the rec approved and them, on some level understanding what and who I'm looking for, but most of the time it's just the amount of, I would love to see a person, you can do this survey next, Lou. How many hires happen completely around the system? And the system comes in and fills in after somebody gets hired kind of thing. And I think this is a big challenge, especially as the ubiquity of candidate data availability is out there, and hiring managers aren't going to have to wait around for the recruiting department to identify candidates for them. They're going to take matters into their own hands. And as you know, they are the ones that fund most of the budgets for the recruiting departments at the end of the day. It all rolls up into this, and it'll be very interesting to see, how much business units and hiring entities and communities start to retain a lot of this stuff back into their own universe as the availability of tools and on-demand facilities and process types of componentry become much more easy for them.
Doug, I'm just so we can keep on all the topics. Brendan, what's your take on this overall concept?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the roles, the size of the company, and where the company is in its sort of growth curve, because I do believe that in some roles, if you're hiring inside salespeople and it's pretty clear what these folks are going to do, or there's roles where you may need to hire at scale in volume, I think you do need to nail things down, particularly if I'm a 23-year-old fresh grad who's going to come in and start my career and I want to have a career path. I think clarity on the role is important. I think in other organizations, maybe earlier in their growth curve or where entrepreneurial skills are, you're looking for pure athlete types, and there's more openness. I think this is a fantastic approach. I think and I think you also get to think in context of the overall HR system. I mean, hiring a bunch of athletes works in different situations and other situations that it can be problematic. But so I think it really depends on where a company is in its stage and what
again,
the roles are.
And I think that's a good point, but I'm going to contend that if you want to hire the best call center people, you still might want to design it to have the best call center people perform on the job. So that's not. And if you want to hire the best design engineers or the best managers, design your process. So the theme that I'm making is design your processes around how they make decisions, not how your ATS or your comp and benefit person makes decisions. So it's one thing. It's a talent-driven strategy, irrespective of the level. How do college kids make decisions on who to work for? How do call center people? How does the inside sales go? To me, it's the idea that if you want to have talent drive it, let talent be the decision maker, not some lawyer, not some comp and benefit person, not some making a company strategy. Jennifer, what's your take on this whole concept of strategy-driven as opposed to process-driven approach?
Well, I think that this has been an issue for a really long time, and I think that one of the biggest things to watch for any organization, no matter what the size, is that change is scary, right? So you watch companies move from one technology to another, and they go in with all the best intentions where they're going to buy this technology, and it's a magic box, and it's going to change the world and change their internal processes, going back to the thought process that technology has been driving strategy for the past 10, 15 years. And it doesn't work that way. And all they end up at the end of the day with is increased in recruiter time, lower recruiter efficiency, which equals increased cost.
Right.
And I think that you can, yes, absolutely do a process overhaul on a lot of different components, but I also want everybody to remember and think about, too, the candidate experience is part of this concept as well. So think about rehauling the candidate experience as part of the process as well. Like you said, hiring passive candidates is very different from active. Candidates have a heck of a lot more choices today than they used to. They used to go geographically, they used to go by who they knew, and they used to go by, I know IBM, therefore I'm going to work for IBM, going back to the whole company-centric concept. It doesn't work that way anymore.
Right. Well, I think Frank had a couple of good points. And I think, so I take what Doug's point said, is everybody works around the process. I, as a recruiter, work around the process. I don't talk to HR if I don't have to. Other recruiters work around the process. The company, you get a great person, it's a one-off. It's not through the oh, I found a great person. They work around the process. The hiring manager changes the job to meet the needs of the candidate. So and now even candidates, I was talking to somebody who was writing an article yesterday, said all the advice she gets for candidates, and there's somebody writing an article for DICE, I think, or something. She said the advice I get from everybody that I'm writing in this article is don't apply to the ATS. Don't apply to the job. Find an employee that you know in the company and let that person refer you to it. So even candidates recognize that they got to go around the process. So we got this process, which is monolithic process, which everybody violates other than the below average people. So it's almost like if you follow the process, you got to be below average. So that's why I say I look at it as let your strategy, which is, hey, we want to hire great people at every level, define the process. And obviously the role that the candidate plays within that. So let's kind of think, well, to me, this is foundational. If you don't do this, you never get there. So now let's kind of get into some digging a little bit deeper, and I'll call it the reckless rule. So this, I think, goes back to what Brendan was talking about. Jim Collins, and this is where put the best people on the bus, and then find the best seat for the person. So the idea is craft the job around the best person. I don't think that's, I mean, obviously you want the best salespeople, the best engineers, the best managers, but you still got to be sales engineers. They got to be pretty close. I'm just saying, give a little bit of break here. Don't be so specific they need 5 to 8 years experience. The idea is, hey, let's open the talent pool, which is, hey, we're looking for sales engineers with 2 years or more experience. And then you find a couple of good ones, and you find some great ones, and then craft the job around the people you hire. So the idea is put the best people on the bus, find the best seat for those people on the bus that meet their requirements, but don't make the boarding pass of the bus so narrow that the best people never get on. And Doug's point earlier was, hey, we're crafting jobs around the best people we find. But how many good people didn't apply because the job said must have 8 years experience and they only had 4? And it could be a high potential person. So the idea is design the job, the specific job after you get the person, have a little bit broader boarding pass to get on the bus. And then improve the final rec after the person's selected so it fits the job. Now, obviously, from a CEO, you do have legal issues that you got to address, and I don't want to minimize those, but you could actually start doing your tracking at the pre-rec level. Hey, here we got this big talent pool of X number of people. Here's a diverse pool. Here's how we did our searching within that pool. But the idea is let's not be so restricted to this narrow rec, which kills us. Because I'm going to contend, and Doug and I had this call earlier this week, you got 100 people in your X number of thousand people in your talent pool. You then say, here we have a basic rec. And you try to find someone who's the closest match to that rec. I'm going to say, don't do that. Find the best people in your talent pool who are reasonably close and craft the rec out afterwards. So that's my pitch. What's your take? Let me go with Brendan, you're first this time.
I completely agree, and I think, so I guess sort of the one thing being, of course, yeah, there are specific skills, as you mentioned, which I sort of alluded to earlier, that you may need to have. But as you're saying this, I was thinking back on people, many people I've interviewed, recruiters are hired, people that, have passed on in interviews, and oftentimes the people that you find that have the most energy, momentum, passion around things are not the been there, done that folks, right? So they're actually not the people that in the sort of traditional model would meet the need. But I think if you look at those people, or look at people even that have had high promotion velocity in their careers today, I would contend that they entered into new roles having never done them before. So it'd be interesting to pull that data, pull a big set of data, and say, hey, star people, did they come in, enter into jobs as been there, done that? I would guess that most did not. So I think there's a huge need to do this, and I think completely agree with it. Get the best talent on the bus and go from there. I think hiring a straight-up all-star athlete who can do things and learn things, and we try to preach that in our trainings and our management mentoring here, is that if you get someone who can, things change, right? Technology changes, functional skills, tactical skills are going to continually change. We know that that's a constant, but inherent talent and ability and passion, I mean, that stuff can't be taught. You find that, you better grab it.
All right, and I hear that velocity of promotion. Think about that, because I think when you promote someone internally, they never have the skills for the job. That's the definition of promotion. And so you write this, okay, we're going to promote Joe into this job, and here's the job spec. It was an internal move and a promotion. If you looked at the actual job description, Joe would never have got it. But because he was demonstrated success in the past and got rapidly promoted, he's going to get another promotion. So I think the issue is, and I'll almost say as a segue into something in the future, I'm going to call future, the deep matching will not just look at titles and skills. It'll start looking at, and I like your term, Brendan, promotional velocity, whatever that is. The person had recognized that he was or she was successful in a prior role, and you use that in intelligence. Doug, what's your take on this record? I know you probably, I think I will give Doug full credit. I stole it from him. He defined the term reckless, and I did steal it from him, but I give him full credit.
Well, we only had invented that term, Lou, because a lot of our companies were looking for a way to do talent pipelining in a way that didn't require requisition. So, when you're saying get people on the bus, does that mean I actually hire people and they just come and show up to the lunchroom for 6 months until we get a project for them? That wouldn't happen with a lot of A talent. But how can I get them into a zone or a relationship, whether that be in my talent community, on my follow my company thing on LinkedIn, or a relationship with my recruiter who called them and just stays in touch with them periodically. I mean, all of those are ways to get in relationship with a candidate as they go through their active and passive cycle, so that there's an awareness of who this talent community is and who's out there, so that when needs do come up, you can try to, do this Match.com event that then matches the best talent up with the best opportunities. And, it's a big part of like I said, why we built our talent community system. Companies knew, especially in the down cycle of the economy, that there was an enormous amount of great talent coming to their career site, but there's no way for a passive candidate to show interest apart from applying for a job. And so, Marketing 101 is, hey, put in your email if you're interested in working for us and tell us what location and interest you have, and we'll keep you in touch with you and continue to show you open opportunities here. And that becomes this way to then drip market to people, so that on a day when they are hopefully early in their cycle ready to make a move, they can raise their hand and take the appropriate process events. And so, and it's no small thing. I mean, we've literally had companies that have millions of people that have entered their email into the database and said, someday I'm going to work for that company. And it's driving, in many cases, as much as 30 to 40% of the applicants that are now coming in after a year or two of building these pipelines. It's driving that much success on a direct marketing basis. So it's just a matter of capturing that interest on a day when maybe the candidate was interested but we didn't have a need, so that on the day that things do come up, we have an automated way to be able to access that and turn into it. And so I think that's what I'm hearing a lot of the energy on the corporate side is, how do I build these pipelines of interest? How do I then automatically match and bring people and pull talent in at a point of need, both for me and for the companies? And how do I have my recruiters know how to filter and sift through the data like Brendan had talked to, so I know who the rock stars are, and in many cases that person is going to drive the entire hiring process because they're just so darn good, and it's just too good of an opportunity not to hire them.
Okay. Good. Thanks, Doug. Jennifer, thoughts, comments on going reckless?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I agree with what Doug said 100%. I think that we sort of see the same thing, not only from the pipelining perspective, but also from the job board perspective. I mean, from where I sit, I'm supposed to be totally against this concept, right? I need a requisition in order to have a job board. But the truth of the matter is, I think that it's doable. I think it's more doable from the position of something we'll talk about later, is when the hiring manager is the person who's actually doing the hiring. A lot of times as a hiring manager, I'm sure a lot of you feel the same way, is sometimes my needs for a person or for the role or for the position will change based on whether or not I think the right candidate is sitting in front of me. So I think if the hiring manager is the person who's actually in control of the process, this concept works very well. If I've got the flexibility to make those decisions and it's an innovative organization that's flexible, if you will, it works. My worry is, and I don't want to be the only naysayer on the panel, my worry is execution, right? Like this is a really big, wonderful concept in theory on paper. It's a great innovative concept for companies that move fast, that don't have tried and true hard processes in place. But I do think that the legal ramifications are a worry. I think the changing of all of the technologies that have been in place is a worry. I can't tell you how many companies that we work with that I hear them say over and over, I've had XATS for 18 years. I have 2 million candidates in that database. I cannot leave them. Well, they can, but they don't feel like they can. So my worry is to make that massive type of shift for an entire organization would be very difficult. I think if you started at specific types of positions, mid to higher level, it could be very effective.
Well, I think you're 100% right. I don't think this is, and I actually would say the roadblock to this is, again, you do have an infrastructure, you do have processes in place, you do have legal guidelines in place on how job descriptions have to be written.
Right.
So to massively change it is a big deal. And I'm thinking, in my own mind, 3 to 5 years or 10 years. But on the other hand, if you're not thinking about it today, you'll never get there. And to me, it's the idea of, that's why I go back to the strategy. If your strategy isn't talent-driven, hey, we want to hire the best call center, the best sales engineers, if that isn't your mantra, then you'll never get there. The idea is, okay, so I'll give you an example of a search I have going on right now. I'm doing a search. I don't do a lot, but I got one for corporate controller, major Fortune 500 company. We've already agreed. Everybody's agreed to the comp, and the candidates agreed. Comp and benefits said we can't pay that person. So now we're probably going to lose the deal, because so I say, so your talent, and I'm pretty aggravated, of course. I'm saying, so you're telling me that the problem we've got is comp and benefits drives your talent strategy. We all recognize it's an A-level candidate, but comp and benefits is going to determine who your company hires. That makes no sense. If you're talent-driven, you might want some guidelines there, but they shouldn't drive the process. Our ATSs drive, oh, we can't change that. The ATS has already got this. We got to fill this field in here. Oh, we can't have a good title if it's the ATS. So the idea is you got to break some of these habits and say, what's the strategy we have here for the company, and let that be the guideline, because otherwise you never get there. Any other just secondary thoughts on this? Because I think implementation, I think you're very right. Cynically, I don't think it's going to happen, other than for companies who have got real great leaders at the HR department and great CEOs are going to pull it off. And we got a lot of invested people. We got a lot of vendors who don't want to see this happen because it changes their business model. And I can appreciate that. And we want to comment on that? I mean, it seems to be the innovator's dilemma. They already got stuff done. I don't want to change it.
I think it's a cost dilemma too, right? So why in the world, if I'm a company that is going to define my talent strategy first, decide that it's going to be reckless, decide that my hiring manager is going to be involved, decide all of these wonderful things, I'm going to choose my technologies based on those decisions. So if you're first starting out, or your company's completely wiping the slate clean from a recruitment process and strategy perspective, it'll work. But I just worry about the old guard and those of us, and I put our company in this example, who've been doing things a certain way for a long time.
Well, I agree. I think that to me is, if I put it here, as breaking the bureaucracy. And I think even people who are innovators, I mean, you just think about it. You got a business, it's invested, it makes money. You're not going to change it. You got to preserve what you got. So you got to fight tooth and nail. And I think each person in his or her role is going to fight tooth or nail here. So this is a bit Panglossian at my level to think it can happen. I pretty much don't have a vested interest in the state, but that's only so I can be a little bit of wild and crazy, but neither here nor there. Let's kind of go to what I call this next one, which is really a technology issue. So this is going to, and I really believe, if I had to say, the new foundation of the technology is past. Why did it do that? Hold on. I don't know if you guys can see what I just saw, but you're not supposed to. So I'm going to believe this is the technology innovation we're talking about. You think about LinkedIn, and I do a lot of work with LinkedIn, but I do a lot of work with it because I like it, and it's a remarkable tool. But I'm going to say the idea of a talent community that has really been around here for 3 to 5 years is going to go passé. I really believe that. Now, Doug wouldn't agree with that, but it's his business, and I can appreciate that. What I'm going to contend is it's going to be replaced by a talent network. Everybody is going to certainly have visibility to everybody else. So if you think you've got a proprietary pool company, A, B, C, D, it isn't. I can get those same people very quickly. And with Facebook coming up with the new tools, with LinkedIn already having the tools in place, and connecting everybody in this talent network. So I'm going to say this is the next thing 3 to 5 years. Who's ever got the best network mapped by quality of candidate with nodes and everything in place is going to win. So this is my, what I would say, the technology advance that's going to drive a lot of this stuff. I call it 360-degree perping your nodes. Perp is a proactive employee referral program. We all know that 30, 40 to 50% of the best people come from your employee referrals. Well, LinkedIn can now match your employees with everybody they know. They already can do it. They're already starting to do it. Accenture did it on the pilot, and I think it's now, I don't know, what do you call it? Auto referral, doesn't matter. I think it's called auto referral or something that LinkedIn can do, yeah, LinkedIn Recruiter. But now you start saying, okay, I want all my employees to start connecting with all the best people they ever worked with at every other company. Rather than me or a recruiter saying, hey, who did you work with in the past who's great, they have it done automatically. Now all of a sudden you're starting to see these connections build up. Now it's not only just peers. I don't just care about an engineer who's got other engineers. I know engineers also work with project managers. I know they work with customers. I know some of them work with vendors. I know some of them work with sales. So I'm starting to think multifunctionally at the network level. And then I'm also going to talk about what I'll call my hot nodes. We know that if you had to look at one function in any company, project managers work with everybody. So I say, hey, geez, and when you do a LinkedIn list, you do a search, who's got the most connections? Well, you can't see them because over 500, everybody's got the same amount. But LinkedIn can see them, and intuitively I know that they're project managers. These people have, because they're working company at IBM, at Accenture, at this company, they've worked with great people every company. Now, if I got some project managers, I want them connected to all the best people they've worked with in the past. And pretty soon I'm going to be, right now I can auto-match them by normalizing the titles. Pretty corny. Okay, I'm looking for a cost accounting manager. It'll look at my connections and say, okay, here's 17 cost accounting managers you worked with in the past. You don't know if they're quality yet or not, but now all of a sudden, if you do some deep intelligence on, using Brendan's point, who's got the most promotional velocity? If that's one, you look at your resume, this person's been promoted 7 times in 4 years. High promotional velocity. Obviously a good person. So now you start adding some intelligence to this network that you're already starting to build. We already know now, Indeed just came out with a product of, hey, who do you know in your company? So you're looking for a job at a company. Before you do that, find employees you know at that company. So we're starting to auto-match jobs with people and people with jobs. So you're taking a lot of the work out. You got interactive CRM, which is meaning a customized CRM, not just batch mailing, but decision tree-based CRM that based on where that person is on his or her job cycle, how many times they applied, all of a sudden you're coming up with this decision tree type of CRM. And so I'm going to make the contention that the depth and quality of this network will be the basic core, moving from talent hubs to a dynamic, just-in-time network that does all the work. Now, thoughts, comments on that, and then I'll ask some specific questions. So who wants to go? Just kind of, maybe Jennifer, you need, I don't care. Let me go Jennifer, Brendan, Doug again in this one, just so we have some rules here, as arbitrary as they may be.
I think if I get to go first, I think the truth of the matter is I agree 100%. I think this is exactly where things are going. I do think, and I'm not just saying this because I'm with the job board, but I do think there will always be people and always be organizations and maybe even types of jobs that will continue to post and pray. But I think when it comes to mid-level careers, you know, I don't know that this is going to be the best type of solution, if you will, for call center positions or retail jobs. Stuff like that. But I think for, you know, mid-level careers, this is going to be the way things work.
Yeah, so for high volume, I think you're right. As I think about that, the high volume, so maybe that's the category is it's high volume, mid volumes, and it's some supply-demand constraints. Doug, what's your take?
Yeah, so I mean,
I've had this discussion a little bit in the past.
You know, the auto networking piece of it is okay, Lou, but one of the big things for me that is interesting is that, you know, a lot of the early CRMs around the talent space have still been primarily push mechanisms, right? So you're getting a list, you're finding it, you're spraying out email or whatever you want, saying, hey, I found you, I'm interested in you, and da-da-da. And I really don't think that that's it. I think more and more tools are now tilting away from publishing of jobs, and now I think it's more syndication of opportunity-based content that candidates can control. So even if I'm on LinkedIn and I'm a part of a group, I get to control what content comes to me in that group. If I'm on Google and I have an RSS feed of jobs by employers of choice, I get to control, which ones come through to me. If I'm on Twitter, I get to decide who I'm going to follow. So there's just been this huge migration of who's going to get at me, how often are they going to get at me, what channel did they get at me from, and what am I going to watch and what's important. And so as much as the 360 auto networking thing is a good thing, and I think it is a good progression, I think it can also get overwhelming very, very quickly. And I think that candidates are going to have really good, strong control points over who's going to get at them, when they get at them, what channels they get to them through. And companies are going to be really challenged as to whether or not they should just spray all of their opportunity content out to everybody all the time, or if it has to somehow go through a relativity and relevance quadrant that gets to the right person at the right time through the right channel so that they can create those opportunistic moments that they want to in their talent supply chain. So.
Okay, so I'm going to give a little bit of rebuttal. We can chat on that. Brendan, your thoughts?
Yeah, a few. I think, at a massive macro level, what's happening is the friction is just being removed from the middle, right? So I'm a candidate. I'm completely in charge of my career. My dream company is Goldman Sachs, McKinsey, and GE. There's no reason in the new world that I can't have a relationship with that company, whether I get hired there tomorrow or in 2 years. So that's a completely different dynamic. And then on the on the recruitment side of things, same thing. I can go access anyone, anywhere, anytime. I think the companies that I think you mentioned, Lou, CEOs and HR leaders are really special. They'll start embracing this new world in a different way. I think when people realize that it all sounds cliche, but it's like talent is the absolute #1 thing. No matter what function you're in, it's all about the people, and it's part of your inherent job. Particularly as a manager, it's not someone else's job to get talent. And oh, by the way, all the data is out there. And the accessibility to talent is available. I think it's going to start optimizing this market for the global market for talent. And then one other just sort of basic example that I think some people are still sort of tripping over themselves and missing the fact that data is available is how many times have people come into your company and interviewed, and then after 7 hours of interview and wasting a lot of time and money, someone walks by the conference room and says, "Oh, Joe Smith is interviewing here? I know Joe Smith. I worked with him 3 years ago at Google. Do not hire that guy." Or he's good and his boss is good. The rigor and information that people are missing because they're not taking the time to slow down and say, hey, data's available, there's real opportunity costs. So I think whoever gets smart enough the quickest is going to win the race for talent, and a lot of it has to do with it. It is about auto networking, auto matching, and data transparency and data availability.
Yeah, so I'm going to let me take all of that, and we can kind of go through this again. So I take Doug's point about syndication. That's still a push. You're pushing it to a person, that person selected it. What if a person sitting there in Omaha, Nebraska, and somebody who they know in Chicago is connected to them, and they find a product marketing position that's a world-class opportunity for them that might not even be the company, but it's just this is a career opportunity that this person can't miss. The fact that that person gets an automatic email, not that they syndicate it to, they don't have to do anything. It's going to be done automatically because they're connected to this person who knows this company at Caterpillar and said, hey, you're in Omaha, and my company put up a posting connected to this person at Caterpillar who's a senior engineer, connected to this person in Omaha, and all of a sudden it says, hey, we have a career opportunity for product manager. Would you be open to talk about it? Now, to me, that person's not making the decision to syndicate anything. They're just saying, hey, at some point in time, without taking away the time variable, they've been presented with a career opportunity. At that moment, that person, because it's been intelligently matched through a trusted middleman, which is this co-employee, the person says, yes, I am interested now. Maybe they're not interested. But the idea that the person has to volunteer, doesn't have to assign anything, I think you've taken all the friction out of it. So that's how I would contend is I think the syndication is a short-term solution to get it. But if you go past that, I'm going to say, hey, everybody's going to be connected with everything else at every given point in time. Now, that's pretty pangloss, pie in the sky, but I still think that's the way recruiters work today. I mean, so, Doug, I knew you worked. I mean, that's the way we work. Now, all of a sudden, it just can be done without a recruiter. It's going to be done. The system is going to do it because we're connected with everybody else. Anybody want to comment on that, or is that just so pie in the sky that it makes no sense?
No, I'll jump in. I think that is actually very true. We have a similar product, without getting into all of that, that we've watched over time not perform really, really well or as expected, because if you ask the employee, if you will, or the person to do the work, like the system will match you to something, but if you ask them to do the work to send it to their network, they don't do it. So I think as long as you've got sort of an unsubscribe mechanism, so like Doug was saying, so you can get out of this hole of being pushed jobs and things all the time, it makes for a good candidate experience. The matching piece, I think, is probably the most important to me, more so than the auto-networking. I mean, as career builder, I'll say that our recommendation engine accounts for more of the applications on our site overall than anything else. And just recommending to candidates to jobs based on their skills, based on their resumes, whatever, is actually what's driving the applications to the process. Yet I go back to, this is the question, if we don't have recs necessarily, what are we basing this on? Because technologically, you've got to be able to say, Jen's resume matches this job description, and I'm going to then push the match out to her. So are you thinking this is going to be matched on a job description that is more of a marketing description, or are you still going to keep the requisition concept?
Well, that's a great question. I actually, when I say reckless, I guess I'm really thinking there will be a substitute. It will be a broader rec. If you have X number of years more than in Java or C++ or whatever the skill set is, it's going to still have some level of skills, but it's going to be a broader band, so then you can then craft the job afterwards. It's going to, I call it a prereq as opposed to an EEO, Equal Employment Opportunity Find rec that's very, very specific. So it's a little bit broader, but it's not going to be profoundly broader, and there could be some marketing components to it. I didn't actually put that slide of what I visualized the rec to be of the future because I felt that was getting, but it's a very fair question. That'll be our next session.
Our next webinar.
Here's some, here's what I just to put in here as basic questions, but Doug, you don't feel free to answer those. I said, who owns the network? I mean, so, hey, we got this network that's really, let's assume that LinkedIn is going to own this network, and based on their stock price and company, they should own the network, and a lot of people assume they're going to open it. The quality of the matching, is that really good? So that's your point, Jennifer, is, okay, how do we, if it's a crappy match, people are going to opt out. Then you got this other bigger issue, which is huge, is everybody is going to know everybody at your company. So therefore, you got retention issues, you got employment issues, you got performance issues, you got so many things. So now you're actually creating more turnover than you used to have. Then you got demographic issues. You got people younger who are looking at it differently, mid-careers, late-stage careers, and retired careers. And everyone's in this. So you got a host of issues. So I'm not saying it's simple. I'm just putting it on the table to discuss. Doug, you want to talk about your thoughts on this? Or
yeah, I want to back up quick on your other thing, Lou, because your rosy example of how a job came up and Jim called Joe in Chicago and said, "Hey, you look great. And are you?" We're literally developing some systems on our end that enable this automated matching today, and we're already running into problems where, because the social networks and their APIs are open, and we can take this matching process and make it blink of an eye, have the best people matched up with the jobs and hey, tell your friend kind of stuff. We've got so much avalanche of that happening that it's not uncommon where the same guy in Chicago gets 5 friends that all email him within 30 minutes saying, hey, there's a job at our company, tell me if you're interested, and they don't know who to respond to because there's just so much efficiency now in the marketplace. So we've had to literally enhance our system to be able to accommodate not just the first person who referred a friend, but every single person for every single rec, because there's just too much efficiency now in the marketplace. And in the old days as headhunters, when we used to work a desk, we knew who the talent in the market was, and it was a foot race. The minute the company put a rec out to the search firm as to who was going to call the candidate first, and I can't tell you how many times I lost the foot race, just because we had visibility, but the companies never knew who the candidates were. And now I think in the new dynamic marketplace and social marketplace, I think there could be problems with that. And I think that's a part of why companies are going to look at wanting a proprietary view of their talent data. So yes, LinkedIn is the biggest professional marketplace or network out on the planet, and but as network in the network concepts explode. You know, my recruiters have their own private networks. My company has my network on LinkedIn. Even my employees have their own private subset networks, and then those people are belonging to groups. And so, you know, I think it's not people want to associate with subsets and tune into different areas, and I think companies would want to have a single view, if you will, of all of their talent. Yes, the talent that they belong and know on LinkedIn that's accessible to them and how to get at them, but it's also who showed up to my career site, who have my recruiters talked to out on Monster and Career Builder, who have my recruiters run into at trade shows and events, who's applied to my ATS system over the last 2 years. I think that's the bigger issue that people are trying to solve, Lou, is how do I roll all of these different elements into a single universe that allows me then to do some of this type of matching and let my recruiters and hiring managers instantly know exactly where to rifle shot into or spend time based on the relationships and candidates that are in my pipeline. And I think that's the bigger enterprise level problem that people are trying to solve.
Yep, and I know you're going to solve it, Doug. I'm talking 5 to 10 years. You'll have it solved by then. That's okay. So let's let's get to the reality. So I love this little cartoon here. It's the network. It is about technology. It's managing the network, the new breed of I don't think with the ATS we're going to get there. I got to be real. I mean, my contention is the ATS is the deal breaker on this whole thing. So separately, I've been trying to get somebody else to build a new ATS. I haven't been successful yet. But they should. I mean, that really, when all is said and done, if we continue to rely on ATS, people are going to work outside of the system. Doug is trying to build this, I don't want to call it middleware, but certainly this interconnecting tool that kind of gets you there. I know Career Builder's doing it. LinkedIn's got one of the things everybody wants to connect with. I bet that LinkedIn's going to change their business model and not let their network be so free. I mean, why would they? That's the key. I mean, that's the key. The heart of this whole thing is LinkedIn, and when they start charging people to get those names, all of a sudden they're going to have another business model that they're going to go after. So I think the technology, we've kind of talked about that. What's your take just on current technology and trends in technology to really pull this off? Because I think that's, to me, is one of the big bottlenecks. Brendan, you want to kind of take your first shot at the problems with technology today and getting there in the future?
Yep. I think the ATS bar today is so low you just trip over it anyway. I mean, I think of this thing at scale. Well, I guess maybe back up to the points that Doug was making. I think Jennifer mentioned earlier. I think it segues nicely into the slide. Is the coming up with the right operating model and how you operationalize this brave new world is hard. It's really hard. So I think there's going to be lots of ideas, and everyone's going to start seeing the future. But the challenge is going to be who's smartest and strong enough to build rigor around executing and scaling. From a technology standpoint, I don't even know if we've fully even contemplated what it means, because the availability of all this information to me is akin to sophisticated systems that run trading systems, auction theory stuff. I mean, it's complicated stuff. And then how you staff that and how you manage that, I think, is a massive challenge. So I haven't seen anyone from an ATS standpoint or a CRM standpoint that's even remotely close to bridging the gap between this new world and how you can manage it with a tool set. But it's got to be everywhere, every time, on in any context. I mean, I know that Doug has some strong points of view about this, that the world is not just sitting behind a laptop. It's anywhere, any place, anytime, and it needs to be available. So I think we're a ways away from it. I think the analytics piece of it, I think probably the first thing you'll see is people really nailing analytics. So the amount of information that's out there can be synthesized and processed, so you can spend the time eliminating the noise and separating the signal from the stream as it relates to, all right, there's 10,000 people that want to work here because availability is there and they can access us and the channels are open. But who are out of the 1,000 people, who are the 20 that are the best? And I need some analytics tool set to figure that out. I think that's probably the first thing we'll start seeing.
Hey, Jennifer, and for this one, kind of keep a short response, 30, 45 seconds. There's a couple other points I want to get to that we want to discuss, and then the highlight of the whole, I look at it at a high-level macro. Jennifer, your thoughts on?
You know, I could go on for hours about this. This is my baby. I think that I think you're right. I think the ATSs are the barrier. They are on old platforms. They are not equipped to answer all of the requests of all of their customers. If I'm an ATS and I have 300 enterprise level clients and all of them have different needs when it comes to these concepts of how to work within the networks and social recruiting, I can't decide where to go because no one really knows what the long-term result is going to be. So I don't think they're making decisions. But what is happening is a lot of little integrators, if you will, are popping up here and there, talking about how they'll sit on top of the vendor and work with the LinkedIns and the jobs to webs and the career builders of the world and trying to figure out how to be that middle bridge. And my worry is the more of those that pop up, the more customers will buy them, add them to their ATS and the 14 other middlewares they have, and then all of a sudden the process, the cost, the tactical strategy just gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, that's how I see it. That's why I say, from a cynical standpoint, I think this is the deal breaker. I mean, although I can sit and pontificate without worrying about it, if I reckon, wow, can't get there from here. Doug, what's your take? That's why I've been urging Doug to build it.
Well, you know, we feel like we have built a good part of it, and we have started hosting a lot of entire integrated strategies, Lou. I mean, a part of what our promise is to our customers is that not only can we help your career site be better, but we can also help your ATS be better. You know, we can actually do things relative to candidate experience, job distribution, automated.
I want to be careful, Doug. Don't make a sales call. Kind of talk about this in a general sense of could it get there. So I just got to be very careful about that. I don't want this to be that.
Yeah,
kind
but
of
I've heard our customers say the thing that I love about some of these other integrators, I'll be vague, is that they allow my ATS to be my ATS. And ATS systems have never been recruitment marketing platforms. They've always been process management and requisition management solutions. And I think too many companies for too long have tried to make it be something that it's not. It's like trying to make Excel be Word. And so, you know, now it can be in its right place in the recruiting strategy, especially because the market has changed so fundamentally. And ATS systems have always, you know, integrated eQuests and job distribution things and pre-employment verification. I mean, they've done a good job of building plugins, if you will, to solve for all of the different gymnastics that we go through to hire somebody. And I think we will continue to see them evolve slowly towards being friendly with all of these new channels, with all of the new expectations that are going to be put on them relative to what companies are trying to do with branding, candidate experience, and analytics things. But I think, you know, we're going to be a ways off. They've got long cycles of development, and the market's changing much faster than, in some cases, their own product development cycles can roll, and that creates a tremendous amount of opportunities for the vendors, the source-oriented vendors within the market. And I think it's a good time for this. There's never been a more exciting time to watch the pressures in the market now start to create opportunities for the ATS companies to be what they can be within the recruiting strategy.
That's cool. Yeah, good point here. Let me there is one point I want to do. I want to talk about what I perceive to be a possibility, but there's a lot of implications of the hiring manager do-it-yourself model, and then we'll kind of sit back at the last 10 minutes and say, okay, let's look at it all together and see what could happen and how you'd prioritize it. But the point that I want to make here is that assuming the technology has improved somewhat, assuming that a hiring manager can get a LinkedIn recruiter kind of product and see all the connections and the interconnection with other employees in the company, so that that person has it. Assuming that you got the template of opportunities, why can't the hiring manager do more and more of the work? We take the point that Brendan made is sourcing is now a heck of a lot easier than it was 10 and 15 and 20 years ago. We all know that candidates accept the hiring manager. Corporate recruiters are overloaded with too much work to do. They can't do the recs. So the idea of the self-serve model is kind of important anyway, and now if the tools become available, why can't the hiring manager take a bigger burden of the whole job? And if he or she can, that does change the role of the corporate recruiter. So let's kind of go around the table of, is the hiring manager do-it-yourself model possible, and what happens to the recruiter? We can do a couple of iterations once you start the dialogue, Doug.
You want me to start it?
Yeah, well, I figured you've been ending it, so I'll let you start it.
Yeah. Well, you know, like you and I talked about earlier this week, Lou, I think a lot of the recruiting shift is going to happen from recruiters being finders to recruiters being facilitators. and with the availability of candidate data on everyone's fingertips, I think that, you know, hiring managers are not always going to run right out and say, hey, I'm going to find the candidate on my own and then, you know, make the hire and come back and tell recruiting later. I don't know that that's going to be the case. There's too much expertise in the recruiting divisions and hopefully in the talent acquisition department where a hiring manager can call the recruiter and say, you know, I'm thinking I need this, and I've got these elements that I'm trying to make in the next hire. What do you think? What are you seeing in the market that could fit this or not fit this? You know, and then literally within 2 seconds, they all dial up LinkedIn. They're looking at a few candidate examples of people that they've networked with, and then the candidates and profiles in the network can help to form and guide and shape, you know, what the actual requisition might become based on who's available in the market, who the recruiter is knowledgeable, has shown interest in the past, is culturally, you know, a fit for the company. And so I think a lot of those dimensions are really going to help a lot when recruiting can get ahead of the knowledge of the market, all of the attributes of a hire, consulting to the hiring managers as to where they should be locating people, where they shouldn't, what skills they can look for, the salary compensation, and literally could maybe even hang up the phone and the recruiter knows which 3 people to call as they're building the requisition, maybe even copying the resume.
Okay, so let me kind of, only because I want to throw this in, I think there's some trends about the hiring manager. You think about the corporate recruiter of the 90s is different than the corporate recruiter of the late 90s and the third-party recruiters. The role of the corporate recruiter has taken over a lot of the role of the third-party recruiter. Corporate recruiters are overburdened. Hiring managers, and the reason they can do this is because first it was job boards. Now corporate recruiters have direct access to candidates. In some way, they're still the middleman. So you start thinking about a 5-step distribution channel from a candidate to the third-party recruiter to the HR group to the HR manager 10, 15 years ago. We're now compressing it. It's the candidate to the corporate recruiter to the hiring manager. Why can't it just be from the candidate to the hiring manager? I think you look at the trend, it clearly says that more and more is going to do that. So let me kind of, Brendan, what's your take on that? You're a recruiter. You're right in there.
Yeah, I think
the role of the hiring manager.
I think they're going to take, I think you're exactly right. I think the role of the recruiter will probably evolve to some degree. It's inevitable when the tools are available and barriers come down to identify people and get in touch with them. If I'm a manager and it's in my best interest to build my team, I mean, my proclivity is going to be to reach out to whoever I can find, not only in my direct network, but people that I can now see in this world of transparent, available data. So, you know, it's going to happen no matter what. So I think there's a need for recruiters to step in and be much more consultative around that, and some of the things that Doug mentioned in terms of how they could show up and what advice they can give, I think will be key. So I think recruiters need to really step up their game around understanding the marketplace. One, understanding the talent strategy of their company so they can consult to the hiring managers and guide, and then understanding the market in depth. Because if you're a recruiter and you're not taking advantage of the fact that you can understand the market very easily today, given what's out there in terms of data, then I think you're frankly not doing your job, and you need to bring to bear to those relationships with the hiring manager when they come and say, hey, I think I need to recruit Susie Q. You can come with a point of view about, well, maybe, but here's some other things you should be thinking about, about X company or Y company or Z company or a different geography, or here's something you should really consider about the dynamics of the marketplace. I think that, and in that way, I think the credibility of the recruiting organization has an opportunity to go up as well. So I think there's a really neat opportunity for the staffing organizations internally at companies to have a bigger seat at the strategic table.
Okay, so let me ask you this question, and let me go to Jennifer first. But so what does a hiring manager typically do when he or she's not getting served by the corporate recruiting department? They tend to go outside, but if they don't have to go, now they can't go outside, but hey, they can look on their own LinkedIn network or whatever it may be. So Jennifer, I mean, we're still at the topic of, is it realistic that the hiring manager is going to be more self-serve, and if so, what's the changing role of the recruiter?
For one, I'm not going to be cynical. I do think that this is realistic, and I do think that companies and even some technologies are doing this well today. I've seen a few new ATSs coming out with more of a hiring manager focus, which I really liked. What I do think is interesting is that you're right, hiring managers will go out on their own. They'll do their own research, but I think the recruiters, when I've seen it done well, the recruiters have still been the guide. They've been the one, like Brendan was just saying, knowing what the market can bear. They know the labor pressure. They know the supply and demand of specific regions. They can actually make recommendations to the hiring manager about where to look. I think as much as recruiters are overburdened, so are hiring managers. We've got a lot of companies that are trying to do more with less. And it's not fair for hiring managers to say to recruiters, go do this work for me. But if there's a symbiotic relationship where the hiring manager does the ultimate sourcing after research done by the recruiter, I think that that sort of relationship might work well going forward.
Yeah, I would actually say, and I'm thinking 5 years, so this is not short term, but if I had to take what everybody said, Doug, Jennifer, and Brendan, I'd say a model that I could see is where the corporate recruiter does a lot of the pre-planning, a lot of the sourcing strategy at the beginning. So it kind of, okay, here's, and how they do that. So it's a critical role there, or somebody's got to do that. But then at the end, also to ensure that the company's talent strategy is achieved. Somebody's got to do that. I know Amazon's got a Raising the Bar committee where somebody in recruiting or HR really guides the quality of that person ultimately being hired. So there is a bridge role there. I just see the role changing. And I think while everybody's overburdened, we also know it's easier. I mean, I'm doing a couple of searches using LinkedIn. It's easy to get candidates right away. What's hard now is to recruit them. So I think the actual recruiting, and the candidate's going to have multiple offers. So I think it's going to be a changing role. I don't exactly know what that changing role is going to be, but certainly changing. Let me bring it all together here. So I think we've got 15 minutes left. I want to take a couple of questions from the people, and we'll kind of have everybody do it. And guys, if anybody on the call has questions related to this overriding topic, I'll let everyone make a pitch here, and then I'll take some questions from the group and throw them to the panel. So the idea that 2020, the workflow is going to change, the technology is going to change, the process is going to change, the tactics are going to change. Part of it's going to be driven by, I'll call this talent-driven strategy. We want to hire great people. So that's the one. If you don't align everything that you're going to be doing to this overriding strategy, you'll fail. Another key dimension is this networking. Let's be real frank. We are going to a social media world. We got all these tools. We got now Google+. We got LinkedIn, which is dominating. We got Facebook that's trying to get in the game. We got aggregators trying to connect the names with open APIs back and forth. And I'm going to say with more deeper intelligence, instantaneously a person who doesn't even know that he or she is looking is going to be connected with a job that hopefully is the right job. If the matching is done right and efficiently, it will be, hey, I'm glad you called me. Not interested yet, but I'm glad you called me. And that will be done whether they join the community or not. I'm also going to take, at another total level, I'm going to go, I'll call it, I mentioned earlier, the demise of the full-time equivalent. We're not, the workforce is changing. We got young people entering it, millenniums who want project-based work. We got people who want full-time jobs in the middle. We got older people. So if you really look at it, what % of our total workforce is going to be full-time equivalent? What's going to be some kind of contingent or project work? Demands the need to go reckless. A reckless is a full-time job, but why are we, so we're kind of forcing a thing, which is a specific rec. Maybe we've got to be more flexible. And so I think the workforce says we should be flexible. We're saying, well, how do we take that into account? Well, one thing is think about it as a different approach. And then the fourth thing is the hiring manager self-serve. So I think we've got these four fundamental forces coming together trying to create recruiting circa 2020 and hiring. So the idea is at the highest level, what is the likelihood, so this is anybody can answer that, the likelihood of this happening, the positive implications of it, the negative implications of it, and the biggest challenges if we're going to go forward. So let me kind of focus on who wants to go first. I'll let you just say you want to go first, and then I'll go around the table the other way. And then I want guys in the audience, if you're listening in, ask questions you want to ask of the panelists as we get into this. So I'll pick a few of the good ones. Brendan, you want to go first on this one?
Sure. What I think there's a lot of things that are just inevitable. I mean, it's take Moore's law. Pick some, but Moore's law is things are going to speed up, and technology is going to change things. The availability of information is going to allow people to do things. So in the context of the hiring manager, it doesn't matter. They're going to take on a different role. It's going to happen. It doesn't matter. They would be doing it more today if there was more availability and more ease. So as the friction barriers come down, it's going to happen. I think that what the positive implications are, I think there's an opportunity, but I think there's going to be massive pressure on recruiting organizations to run differently and run like businesses. because I think, I think there'll probably be recruiting organizations who fear this change, right? Oh, whoa, the hiring manager is now going to get involved and play a different role. What is all this? Everyone's going to participate in this process. I think we all need to sort of put our ego aside and understand, okay, what role can we play, because it's inevitable. I think the biggest challenge is going to be building the right organizational structure in hiring the right types of people and recruiting leaders. They may not even be recruiting leaders. They may come from a different type of background, I don't know, that can run hiring organizations or talent organizations who facilitate this new world. I think it's this level of sophistication and there'll be pressure on it to raise the level of sophistication that we all bring as staffing leaders. So I think that's going to be the biggest challenge. I think the biggest upside is it's getting there now. There's almost a complete meritocracy in a world of transparent data, right? I mean, 20 years ago, if my dad was an investment banker and went to Harvard, I might have a really cool opportunity that the kid, next door neighbor may not have. That world is gone.
Interesting. Interesting point.
So,
Jennifer, you want to kind of comment on this, and we'll take some questions, and then get Doug, and then first Jennifer, then Doug, then we'll take some questions.
Yeah, sure, and I'll make it quick. I think the likelihood is, like Brendan said, I think that some of this is just simply going to evolve. I don't know that all of it's going to happen immediately, like we talked about the rec list before, but I think the auto matching and the talent networks pieces, a hiring manager will start to evolve. Positive implications, truthfully, I think this could be an interesting study to see if it actually lowers recruitment costs. It will be interesting to see if, as the role of the recruiter changes, as hiring managers get involved and auto matching and talent networks become more and more popular, does that lower the overall cost of the amount of technology systems you're using, recruiter efficiency costs, that sort of thing. So I'd like to think that that might be a positive implication. Negative implications, I think there's going to be resistance to change, and that's part of the biggest challenge this piece, is that there's always going to be resistance to change. It's going to be some big changes in the industry from a negative perspective as far as how technologies come and go. But other than that, I think pieces of it will happen, and I think other pieces will take much longer.
Yeah, let me kind of just, I'm going to just set the stage for you, Doug. I think I'm going to set the stage so you can answer it. I think it's going to take a different breed of leader, that the early adopters will have a positive implication. Those who are in the second, say the 25% that start doing something at the leadership level, trying to figure it out, will definitely have an advantage. Everybody else is going to be a follower. I think the negative implications are going to be huge for people who don't get. I think it could get there, but I think if you're the late one waiting to see if it's successful or not, you're just going to get the leftovers. On the other hand, so I don't know if that's, I'm just kind of thinking this out loud here. Doug, what's your take? And forget what I just said, or you can add to it or do whatever you want. What's your take on this whole, at the macro level of this whole concept here?
Well, I like what Brendan said. Is it likely? It's already happening, Lou. It's already well underway, whether the companies want to acknowledge it or not. I think you're going to get workflow technology, process, and tactics out of the center of this thing. I think, companies that can do things lean, fast are going to be, I'd rather see your circle here go as an outside ring that connects all four of these things together as opposed to being a bullseye in the middle, because the companies that can get out of their own way with their technology, workflow, and tactics and actually can integrate them into all of these things, what talent they want from a planning, what hiring managers they should get engaged in, which ones they shouldn't, what matching technology they use, and then, what are their demand needs and flex fits and how flexible can they be. I mean, to me, all of that stuff is going to be stuff that's just an integrated part of all of these. I think the big changes, though, the thing I don't see on here, Lou, is marketplace intelligence in terms of where do I go to get the talent. Yeah, it's Auto 360, it goes everywhere, and I've got 5,000 people in my LinkedIn network, but who should I be talking to today based on what I'm going to need to hire for tomorrow? I mean, to me, that is where the crown jewels of an intelligent content and a true Web 3.0 world is going to be going to, is shaking out the knowledge and the intelligent and actionable content that automatically does a lot of this, but really getting to know exactly who should be talking to who at the end of the day is going to be big. I think one of my big predictions, Lou, is just like I went into the Best Buy the other day to buy something, and they said, hey, Doug, we know you, and we'd like to give you a $3,000 credit card right now. And I thought to myself,
well, they don't know you too well, do they?
That's right, exactly. They didn't know me that well. But there's this thing called the FICO score, and the FICO score is something that we put on everybody that, banking firms are willing to give me instantly, an offer of a credit. And I think LinkedIn could pull this off if they wanted to. I like the idea of an eco score, where people can get instant offers. Imagine applying for a job in an ATS system, and it does a cycle, and it looks at your profile, the length of employment, your velocity, like Brandon said, your salary, comp, certification of skills, references, education, and bam, you instantly get an offer for a job. Right on site. I mean, I think if anybody can get to that, Lou, by 2020, that'll be a very interesting type of thing, and I predict it'll happen maybe even before then.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I know people are doing it. Yeah, I guess my sense is that there's a lot. The middle part is really how you execute every day. So that's what I was saying. This is what you're going to do every day, and it's driven by these outside forces. So that's why the graphic was that way. So you could argue that the graphic is wrong, and I can agree with that. But it's the idea of, hey, you got to do stuff, and right now we don't do stuff based on strategy. We don't recognize that there's new tools out there. We don't recognize the hiring managers doing it. But if we do take this outside, hey, let's build our processes around strategies and what's available, you're going to come off in the wrong direction. Let me take a couple of questions, and I saw a couple of them are, what do you think this has to do with, I know a couple of people asked about RPOs. So what do you think the effect this would be on third-party recruiters and RPOs? Brendan, I think you're the closest because you, both at Microsoft and LinkedIn, you've used them. What's your take on that as a vendor or as a customer of RPOs and third-party recruiters? What do you think this whole impact 3 to 5 years out is going to be?
Well, candidly, I think third-party recruitment, they're going to be subject to change as well. So I think they need to figure out a different business model because I think that Doug mentioned it early on. I mean, the differentiation, if I was a head guy at a search firm or an agency, I'd be like, I have a proprietary database of the best people in the world and no one else knows and I know them all. Well, that's gone. Now there's living, breathing databases that are available that people can find who they want. So I think there's tremendous pressure that people may not see it today, but I think it's going to accelerate quickly on third parties to change their models. I think there's probably a neat opportunity for RPOs to evolve a model to consult around this new world. So whoever sprints to the place where they can figure that out and not use sort of traditional, hey, we're going to do name generation, or we're going to simply do traditional things and just outside your company wall. I think that's different. I think people need to sort of lean into where this change is happening, and there's a real opportunity for someone as a third-party firm to change their model to keep up with it. So I think there's opportunity there. But placing people, I think, is those days are
yeah, I think you're right. Let me ask the last question. But I think this is a very profound one. I want to thank Evan for coming up with it. So I'm going to kind of paraphrase it because it's the longest one in the box there and it's very small type. But the idea that we have this generational change going on. Right now the 30s, 40s, and 50-year-olds are thinking, hey, we got this young group coming in. But certainly that young group is going to be the middle group, and they've done different things from the tools they use, the mobile tools, the technologies, the schools they've gone to, the ideas of careers. What's the generational thing with respect to the impact of all of this stuff from a generation? Because right now we think social media is hot. Yeah, but it wasn't hot 5 years ago, and it's probably going to be different 5 years from now. So what do you think the generational impact of all of this stuff, all the tools, all the technology? Evan, I'm not sure that I asked your question properly, but what's your take on that? Let's just kind of have a quick round robin and a quick summary, thinking about, hey, we got a new generation of people coming in, and 5 and 10, 15 years, they're going to be running the place. And some of you guys will be part of that group, but I certainly won't be. But what's your call? So let me go with Doug, Jennifer, Brendan.
Yeah, Lou, so, generationally, I don't even know if it's generational. There are people that are early adopters on every age group out there. I mean, even you, Lou, are adopted stuff much more aggressively than other people. And I think that early adopters, especially the ones that can really tangibly use this stuff to make result-oriented and measurable activities happen, are going to be the ones that lead the charge. And I just don't see it stopping, and I see the pace of it being so overwhelming now that everybody is now moving a little more quickly into the early adopter category. But I think they want to do it in tangible ways. And you asked about the role of the RPOs out there, Lou. The ones that we see out there are following kind of that mantra that you had put together, where they're the ones that can parachute into the company and start doing doing this stuff, but not as a way to take over and throw the internal teams out, but as an enabling type of an approach. And I know you talked, Lou, about how you guys went through this process, where if an RPO is we do it for you, a lot of companies want to go through this, well, okay, we'll do it for you, but then we're going to do it for you, and you're going to watch us, and then we're going to have you do it, and then we'll watch you, and then ultimately you can do this for yourself. And I think that's the new model for consultancies, especially in talent acquisition, that are going to show up and really start to bring to bear these new interactive recruiting and talent acquisition strategies. And I think that will reduce any of the hesitancies that companies have around not adopting this stuff as quickly as they possibly can.
Okay, 30 seconds, Jennifer. How would you think vendors and recruiters? And I know it's short, but that's what we got.
That's okay. So from a generational perspective, I think, the younger generation coming into this, they expect...
Actually, we're talking now, I think, about that question I asked about, I thought we already answered that. I thought we're now on the RPO question. How is vendors and RPOs going to do it? Or maybe I'm wrong. No, you're right. It probably is. I'm lost here. Whatever you want to answer, Jennifer, go for it.
I'll do generational because Brendan and Doug did a good job on RPO. I think generationally, I think people of the younger generation, if you will, who are coming into this expect this. They don't have some of the experiences that we all have had who've been in this industry a long time. They are not jaded, if you will, when it comes to technologies and processes. And I think they'll come in trying to save money. And I really do think that they'll look at the bottom line from an analytics perspective and from a financial perspective and look at the process that's going to give them the biggest bang for their buck and the most efficiency from a recruiting strategy.
Okay. Brendan, almost the last word before I say goodbye to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's summed it up really nicely. I think it's, as you said, either you're going to sort of evolve or die and be left with the leftovers. So I think it's a good time for them to sort of pause and think about sort of what they need to do to change organizationally to keep up with the pace of change, because it's going to happen regardless.
Yep.
Okay, here's what I'm going to suggest we do. I'm going to contend, I think the issue is things are going to change, as everyone made the point. Things are changing already in those directions. Those that take the lead on pulling it all together, and it's not, I think, will be the winners. So it's waiting for it to happen. It's too late. You got to get actively involved and start thinking about it. And I would say start with your company strategy, and is it aligned? What are you doing day to day? Are you really going after top talent, or are you just trying to fill positions? I think when you start thinking of it that way, things begin to change. If you want the handout, I'm going to I'll post it on the Recruiters Wall. It's recruiterswall.com. Again, recruiterswall.com. I'll post it on the next hour. Join the Recruiters Wall. That's the best way to get it. I'll post it later this afternoon, and then then you'll find the link on the Recruiters Wall. I'm not going to and also I will just say the one piece of commercial. If you also want to have a sneak peek of what Doug talked about, our process called performance-based hiring, we have a sneak peek of that program on July 29th. So that's it on the commercial side. That's our sponsor. Hopefully, guys, you found some good stuff here. Didn't know I was going to get a phone call exactly at 11:30. Told people to call me. I didn't think they would. So given that, that's where we stand. Good luck, everybody. I hope you found this valuable. Look forward to seeing you at a future webcast. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Brendan. Thank you, Jennifer. It was great. I thought it was awesome. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thanks much. Take care, guys.
Great. Thank you, Lou, and thank you to all of our panelists. You will be getting a follow-up email in your inbox soon with some of that follow-up information and those offers. So be looking for that, and we look forward to seeing you at a future Adler Group webinar. Have a great day.
And make sure, JJ, in the email, if you send it out, that they'll get the handout at recruiterswall.com.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Right. Thanks. Bye-bye.